Hello, the cockpit is basically built and painted, so now it's time for the details. And today I will be building the lighting control panel, adding some basic cockpit lighting stuff, and also powering it with computer PSU. But before we begin, just a disclaimer. I'm not an electrician, I'm not an expert in this matter, so if you're going to build anything that has electricity going through it, make sure you know what you're doing. To best of my knowledge, 12 volt isn't a health hazard, but it most certainly is fire hazard. Before I start building anything, let's just take a look at the components that I'll be using here. First thing I have here, this is I guess 430 watt computer power supply unit. I just pick it as second hand for 20 euros. This should be quite silent. The PSU connects to a PSU breakout board. This is just something that you connect your motherboard cable into, and you'll have easy access to different voltages that you can get out from the PSU itself. One basic thing worth noticing about these power supplies is that they don't turn on when you plug them in. You need to basically connect one cable here to the ground and then it turns on. Many of these breakout boards have a separate button just to turn it on, which works perfectly, but not everyone has the ability to connect the external switch here. So if you're getting a breakout board and want to control it with the extra switch, make sure that it supports it. Okay, when I turn this on, you'll see the light here, and it is connected to a LED dimmer. So I can just turn it on and I have power. I'm going to use these LED strips for the generic lighting, and then I'm going to use some circuits for the background lighting for most of the panels. And this basic circuit just has several LEDs and one resistor. And as you see from the image, the LEDs are flickering quite badly here. And this is actually worth noting because I diagnosed the problem in the wrong way and ended up buying these unnecessary expensive LED dimmers. The PSU that I'm using actually has a minimum load. And if I'm not providing enough load for it, that just doesn't provide me consistent voltage or consistent output when using it. I'm quite sure that my plans here will provide enough load for it, so I don't think I have any issues here. And in the end, I still ended up with quite good LED dimmers. This pulse width modulation thing that fits perfectly in the panels that I'm using. But if you're not planning to build any completely crazy setup that I am here, you will be more likely better off with just generic few amp power supply that you can find from pretty much anywhere for really cheap price. And then it's time to start building the panels. The basic approach I have building the panels is that I start designing the panel in Fusion 360, and when I'm happy with it, I'll take the file and 3D print it in white PLA. The reason for the white PLA is that it is translucent, so I can use the background lighting. When I'm happy with the print, I'm just sanding it quickly and adding a few coats, I guess something like 3 coats of spray paint. And then for the markings. I guess I could design the markings in Fusion 360 as with the panels, but I've had some bad luck with exporting the fonts and importing them into Lightburn that I use to control the laser engraver. And this is a lesson I learned the hard way. The power required between panels might change simply because I might need to add some extra coats of paint or something like that. So I ended up with the one panel that I had to do multiple passes, and the lettering ended up having ghosting. Now I'm just taking this end of the roll filament that I wouldn't be able to use for most of the print any case, and print out these small squares. And I just treat it exactly the same way that I'm treating the panel while I'm painting it. And when I'm happy with the settings, I'm just going to engrave the markings to the proper panel. This way I won't have to redo the panel multiple times. The panel came out okay. It's not perfect, but it's good enough for me. There are a few issues that I have here, like some kind of markings from the printing and stuff like that. But as I learn a bit more, I think I can get rid of those also. And on the back side, I have basically the holes for all the switches and knobs and everything, but also a hole for the LEDs. So then it's just time to start assembling this setup. But before I can actually start working with anything, I need to use this and cut out a piece of the angled side panel so I can fit this in place when it's ready. And then it's finally time to start working with the electrics. Here I'm adding all the LEDs in place and just taking a note the positive and negative side so the electricity will flow through it. And then applying some hot glue just to keep everything in place. And I have to admit I'm not good at soldering. Here I'm just connecting the LEDs, so I have a series of 3 or 4 LEDs and appropriate resistor here. And I'm also protecting the connections with the heat shrink tubing here. After a lot of soldering, it was finally time to turn everything on, and I was happy to see that everything worked perfectly here. And after the LEDs, it was time for the switches. Okay, now that I have one circuit in place, let's go through the setup. First, I have the breakout board here, and this is connected. The negative wire is connected straight to the LED dimmer, and positive wire to the switch, which is connected to the LED dimmer. And then the LED dimmer is connected to this thing where I can attach single panels. And from here, all the wires go to the LEDs. And now I can just easily flip the switch, and it has power, and I can also control the brightness here. So now it's time just to add the rest of the circuits here. It ended up being quite a mess, and I would figure out there must be better ways to do it, but this will work. I think this will work in any case. So I'm quite happy with it. As you can see, I have this main power control here that I can use to bring the PSU alive. Then I have the cabin lights that's going to just start the LED strips that I am going to come in there. Instrument lighting 1 will be for the permanent panels, and instrument lighting 2 will be for the switchable for the modular panels. Then I also have this small reader light thing. I'm not going to add it yet, but I have a place for it, so this will be just kind of basically a spotlight or a map light that I can use. And one of the small details, these black hex-headed screws that I'm using to attach this thing to side panels. And then it was finally time to add the panel in its place and start working with the wiring inside the side cabinet. And this is where the maintenance panels that I made to the side cabinets are really useful. And when the panel was in place, it was time for some delicate soldering with the LED strips, and everything seemed to work perfectly, so it was time to install the LED strips into the grooves that I had inside the trims. After I had plugged in everything and I was ready to turn on the power for the panel background lighting, I switched it on and nothing happened. And I must say I spent more time troubleshooting the issue than I'm comfortable admitting before realizing that basically it was because of this. I used these connectors that, I don't know, I might have used the wrong tool to try to squeeze this tight. I might just have the wrong technique. It might be that this connector is just basically too large for this small wire or something like that. But I was just basically managed to break out the connectors. So because of that, I took this fuse box away that I was planning to use and for now I'm just using kind of the basic connectors, and hoping that I'm not causing any issues. I'll most likely bring this back a bit later when I figure out the best way to connect the stuff. I don't want to solder them, but just kind of figuring out the better way to connect these, or just use this in a way that I won't break them. And if we take a look inside to the cabinet, I have the PSU connected to the breakout board and then connected to this basic connection strip, and from that to separate circuits. Well, that was quite a lot of work, countless of hours working with this stuff, troubleshooting some issues, and especially the soldering part, because that's something I'm not expert with, and it's something I really need to learn to be better with in the future. But at the same time, I'm finished with the lighting panel setup, and even if I say so myself, it ended up being quite amazing. I'm really happy with it. So in this series, I still have a couple of episodes left. At least I'm going to build one of the models here at some point, and then I'll need to basically dismantle my old cockpit and take this to the room and set everything up. So that's at least 2 episodes for you still left in this series. But for now, thanks for watching and see you later.